everyone. My name is Sanjana Arora, and I'm the Director of Media and Publicity and your host for the Stikeman Mini Edition series. I will take you on this journey of insightful discussion, which can benefit ITLs maneuver through the licensing process. Today, we have with us our first guest, Natasha Bhimji. Natasha is the Director of Student Programs, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We will learn about her journey and discuss various questions which often come up while navigating through the recruitment process. With that, I would like to hand it over to Natasha to tell us a little bit about herself and her journey in the legal profession.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today. As Sanjana said, my name is Natasha. I'm a 10-year call, so I was called to the bar in 2012. I went to DAL for law school, and before that, I was at McMaster University where I studied political science. I always thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't know what it actually meant, though. I watched TV, and so I assumed that being a courtroom lawyer was what I wanted to be. And I went to law school and I loved it. I found it challenging. But I found that the things that made me the most excited at law school are actually anything sort of people oriented. So I was involved going back to the piece about networking. I met the person who used to be in my role here at Stikeman Elliott about 8 years ago as a part of my networking. And actually I met my now boss 8 years ago. And so 4 years ago, when there was an opportunity at Stikeman Elliott, it was an easy sort of conversation because I'd met these people already. And part of what I think ITLs need to do, I think sometimes, I'm sort of veering away a little bit from my journey, but I think sometimes you just want to find a job because you just want to get into the market and get your feet wet. I understand that, but I also think like it is incredibly important to learn firms, see if that's somewhere that you can thrive, be your authentic self, be genuine. And that was something that as soon as I met with the lawyers at Stikeman Elliott in Toronto, I felt like myself from day one. I did not feel like I had to put on a mask. I came in, I was authentically me. And so I actually came to be the Director of Student Programs, and that was my role for about 2 years. I went on mat leave, with my second child. And when I returned, it was 2020. It was the year of George Floyd, a lot of the racial unrest in the US. And I thought, well, Stikeman Elliott has a ton of diversity initiatives, but I wanted to be more involved. I didn't want just to be sitting on the side and just hearing things. I wanted to be a part of the change. And so my role at the firm is now diversity, equity, inclusion, but it's more of a national mandate. So I'm the national co-chair with a partner from Montreal who I think will be featured on another episode. And so together we are really facing all of the challenges that diverse associates face as they navigate their legal careers, and that there's so much that ITLs have to offer. And that's a part of my role as D&I to make sure that ITLs have that opportunity to show what it is that they can do, because you're all coming from an incredible breadth of experience. And when you're applying for these jobs, you are many 10 years post-call and can bring so much. So all to say that's a part of my role, and I'm anyway excited to answer more of the questions.
Thank you so much for that answer, Natasha. And this has been a very interesting couple of years for you. But what motivated you to pursue talent management and a non-practicing role thereafter?
So it was really, I think it goes back to when I was young, I actually wanted to be a teacher. I sort of say this as a joke, but my parents, there were only a few acceptable jobs for my parents. And so it was lawyer, accountant, doctor, which was funny because my mom is a teacher, and math was not my strong point. And so law was the route that I chose. But as I said, sort of like that teaching, the development, I think being sort of a trusted advisor, those, as I said, those are the things that really were my passion. And so when I was doing that networking over the course of a year, that's when I realized that sort of like this pseudo human resources role within a law firm that are typically held by lawyers was exactly what I wanted to do. And I've been doing, as I said, now for 8 years, and I've never regretted it. And this is a job that I wake up every morning excited to do. And I'm always just excited about the next challenge, and I intend to do this for the rest of my career. And so it really was just like learning more and following my gut that that I wanted a more people-oriented role. But I will also say, had I not been a lawyer, I would not have gotten this role. And so I think that having a law degree, being a lawyer, opens so many doors that people don't even realize, like, it's outside of the traditional practice of law. There's so many things you can do with a law degree.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think with ideas or even just lawyers, particularly in Canada, there is so much that you can do with a law degree, and not just if you don't want to be a practicing lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
With that, can you tell us more about your role at Stikeman
Mm-hmm.
Elliott as the director, student program, and DEI?
Sure. So I'll tell you about both. So the student program role is really the full cycle of a student. So from recruitment at the law school stage to onboarding, orientation at the firm, and then really monitoring the work that the students have access to, making sure they're getting really good quality work, getting great mentorship, building strong relationships, and really supporting them in their experience as a student. And then so that's as a summer student. Then when they come back in article, really thinking about their long-term career and what practice areas that they want to practice into. And then so, of course, with that comes performance management, so their reviews and then hire back. And so that's the student program. And then on the D&I side, we're still very much at our early stages of our D&I journey at Stikeman Elliott, but it runs the gamut of from training. So training on how to be a trans ally, training on Indigenous history, we had a pretty large Black History Month offering.
Yeah.
So education, and then also looking at things like how files are staffed and making sure files are staffed with diversity in mind, because as you know, it's not just a nice thing to have, it's a business imperative to have a diverse lawyers on files. And so looking at that, and also looking at our own associates and making sure that those who are diverse last and want to be partners at the firm, because we want to give them the tools to succeed. And private practice is hard. It's hard, especially as people start to grow their families and they start thinking about lifestyle. And so we're also thinking about those issues and how best to retain our top talent, and making sure that the students that I do recruit, which I'm very proud of, that it's a very diverse class every year, that eventually gets reflected in our partnership. And so I find my two roles work very well together, because I'm responsible for making sure that we have a diverse class, and then thinking about the things for them to succeed and stay as associates. So that's my role. It's hard to put your job in sort of a nutshell. And as I'm sure you know, the talent management is also kind of a catch-all for law firm. So my talent management team, we also do fun things, like we plan socials and engagement events and things like that.
This is very interesting, Natasha. So in your role of Director of Student Program, I'm sure you've come across a lot of ideas
Mm-hmm.
that they find it difficult to navigate through the relicensing and the qualification process, finding an article placement, some of the toughest things to do. What advice would you give to ITLs at various stages of the qualification process?
So I'd say first, don't be discouraged. I do think that there are a lot of hoops that ITLs have to go through, and I think it can feel easy to be like, I'm not going to go through all these hoops, I'm just going to find something else. I'd say don't be discouraged. Two, I think networking, as I said in my own personal experience, is critical. I think there's so much paper that's put in front of people like me. And so we see thousands of applications a year. And so if you've built a relationship with someone in my role, or lawyers or students at the firm, I think it just adds another layer to the paper, so we can actually know who you are, have a rapport with you. So I'd say network, don't get discouraged. I think attend anything that if there's any ITL networking events, if there's any sessions, webinars like this, I think attend all of those. And also, I feel like the ITL network has done a really great job of now being involved in the OCI process. I think before it was harder for ITLs to figure out how to get into it's quite a cyclical train that we do in student recruitment. And so I think using the resources that have now been put in place to apply during that process and go through that recruitment process, because what I'll say is the internationally trained lawyers that I have met through the OCI process have been incredible, and they're always so highly sought after. Like all of the firms want these candidates because we're not training, you're not training you for the first time. It really is, I think the thing with the ITLs are doing is just building relationships, but they know how to do the legal work. You know how to research, you know how to run a transaction. So all to say is network, don't be discouraged, and maybe sometimes things take a little bit longer, but to also not be discouraged by that. But also, if you have to apply in multiple rounds. So I've seen candidates who apply the first time, they're so close to getting an offer, they haven't, they apply again, they get an offer. And so just also sort of persevering.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for that great advice. And this makes a good segue to our next question, which is how can ITLs make their application for the articling or summer position stand out?
So sort of what I was saying about networking, I think that's something where it's not the application, it's connecting with people. But I'd also say most of our firms, at least the big ones, have recruitment events throughout the summer. And I find that a lot of ITLs don't attend them. And so that's a great way for ITLs to research the firm, learn about the firm, and then build relationships. And so when you're actually drafting your cover letters, you can actually the piece of where you say that why you're interested in Stikeman Elliott, you're actually able to say, I'm interested in Stikeman Elliott because I met with X. I'm really interested to learn about their practice. And so I think it makes that easier. And then to the interview phase, then you can talk about that experience. Like I was able to meet a bunch of people. I really feel like I could see myself growing and thriving. And so I'd say just take advantage of all of the opportunities available to you. And then of course, like the simple things like making sure that there are no spelling mistakes, or making sure that the letters aren't addressed to the wrong person. I give this advice not just to ITLs, but to all the students, because every year I see there's always Natasha with the wrong firm name, or another thing that they put is when people haven't done their proper research on the firm. And so I'll get applications from students who say that they're interested in practicing IP law at the Toronto office of Stikeman Elliott. We do not practice IP law. And so when I see that, it shows that you haven't done your research, and this is probably just some generic letter that you're sending to everybody. So I think just making sure that it's well researched, and to take advantage of any open houses, career events any of the firms have would be my advice.
Now that we have spoken about the difficult part and how to maneuver through the difficult process of recruiting, I would like to know from you, how do you manage the tough work-life balance and keep yourself motivated?
You know, that's a hard question, and I'll say 4 years ago my answer would have been different. 2 years ago my answer would have been different. The pandemic has burnt everyone out, and so it's been really tough. I think as I'm sure everyone can appreciate, the lines of personal life and work life have now been completely blurred. I have a background up because my office is actually my bedroom. And so there were times where I didn't even want to be in my room because I had been here all day. And so I'd end up falling asleep on the couch because I just didn't want to be in my office for 24 hours. But what I'll say is, and as I mentioned, I'm a mom of 2. And so balancing being a parent with work, it's hard. And so our ITL should also look for firms that are welcoming of flexible lifestyles. And so even as we sort of transition back to a return to office, that's something that sort of keeps me at Stikeman Elliott, because they understand that parents with young kids, my daughter finishes school at 2:30 and I'll go pick her up at 3. And so people know that if I put blocks in my calendars for the time that I'm doing mom things in the middle of the day, but maybe I have to log in at 8 o'clock at night and catch up on the things that I missed because I was being a parent. And so I think it's setting boundaries, but I think it's also easier for me to say because I am 10 years post-call. First and second year associates, or when you're trying to prove yourself, it's harder to say to a partner or your boss, I need these blocks for my life. But I think if you start at an early stage and sort of be assertive in setting boundaries, that's how you're able to do it. But it's not perfect. You learn, you make mistakes, you figure it out, and then as you develop in your career, you realize what the things that are important to you, and it's often family. And so I do it just by putting blocks in my calendar. And it's not just my kids. I try and exercise in the middle of the day. I try and do things that help my mental health. And what keeps me motivated, because I have a people role, the people are what keep me motivated. Everyone brings such energy, and it's easy for me to stay motivated in my role, because then once, I always say, they graduate from me to being an associate, and then getting to see them develop in their careers and stay and eventually become partners, it's very fulfilling for me. So yeah, again, I don't have it perfect. Some days I do more work, less life. Some days more life, less work. But that's what also, like, now technology has made life so much easier. You can do things on your phone. You can do things at any time. So I think all of those things have made things easier, but it's still quite difficult. And I know for practicing lawyers, it's even harder, which is also why my role, talent management, is a role that you can have a life a little bit better than when you practice, because it's a little bit more predictable. You can plan better.
Thanks, Natasha, for the great advice, and reminding us, all of us, that we have to try and strike the right balance, even though it can be hard on certain days. As we head towards the end of our discussion, we would like to know from you DE&I initiatives of Stikeman. So can you elaborate a little bit on the inclusion and diversity initiatives of the firm, and what are your plans for the 2022 and 23 year?
Sure. So we have a very ambitious 2022 plan, but as I sort of referenced earlier, some of the things that we have been doing, it's really just, as I said, because we're at the early stages of our D&I journey, it's really just education and trying to educate our partners, our associates, on things that they didn't have to think about 10, 15 years ago. So as I said, being a trans ally, and we have a partnership with our Children's Medicine, which is an Indigenous community organization. And so paying attention to Indigenous history, and then using their support to indigenize our hiring processes. Something that I'm really proud of is last summer we started something called our work allocation pilot project in the Toronto office for our students. And the reason why we brought it in was, so prior to this, students would get work sort of on a free market basis. They would it was during the pandemic, so virtually knock on doors, ask for work, and that's how they would get work. But we found that unfairly disadvantaged oftentimes diverse and female students, because it was easier for a partner to give it to someone that looked, felt, sound similar to them. And so we wanted to level the playing field as a student. There's no point having this amazing firm and a robust student program if once you graduate from my student program, that not everyone has had the same access to skill development, to relationships, and also to have the proper, I guess, experience to make decisions about their career and what practice areas they want to practice in. And so we created this project where we're ensuring that every student has worked with a good range of lawyers, has had access to various types of work, that there's not some students who are just doing due diligence, that students are able to take first cuts at drafting things and more stretch assignments and more high level work. And so we've done that last summer for our summer students, and then introduced it to our articling students. And so the feedback has been extremely positive, and mostly, actually, I'd say, from the mentors, because the mentors have become more engaged, so they know what their students are working on. Not that they weren't engaged before, but as a part of this project, I'm sending weekly reports to the mentors on what their students are working on, which they didn't have before. And so oftentimes partners would have to wait until the end of the month to see the hours of their mentees. And at that point, a month is a little bit late to try and change things or course correct. So that's something that I'm really proud of. Something else that we're looking that I'm actually currently working on, which I'm excited about, is we're looking at our top clients and how how the files have been staffed. And so making sure, as I said earlier, but we want our files to be staffed by a diverse workforce. And so looking at whether the work, that all the D&I work that we're doing is actually translating into diverse work teams. And so that's something that I'm doing a deep data dive on now. And it's funny, I'm not good at Excel. I'm not a statistician. So it's requiring a lot of gray matter from me, but all of these things to try and really impact change for the long term at the firm. Another thing that we're looking at is when associates are leaving and seeing if there's any patterns as to the timing when associates are leaving, if diverse associates or female associates are leaving in a greater proportion. And so we're doing a lot of, as I said, education is where we're at now, and trying to learn all of the things that we need to do to fix it going forward. So those are some of the things that we've done.
Thanks, Natasha. We are really excited to see the projects that you have achieved so much success, and are also very excited for the upcoming projects, especially for the ITLs. Thanks a lot again for all the amazing advice for our ITLs, and I'm sure all our viewers would have a lot of great takeaways from this discussion. With that, we conclude our episode, and we would again like to thank Natasha for all her amazing insights, and we will see you in the next episode of the mini statement series.
It's my pleasure. It was wonderful being here today. And if anyone ever wants to reach out to me or have any questions, I'm always happy to help.